It was a quiet, starless night in the desert. A small town lay on the outskirts of Arizona, far away from the bustling cities, but not far enough to escape the attention of the world's military. The stillness of the night was shattered when an explosion lit up the sky. A streak of fire, bright and unearthly, crashed down from above, sending waves of heat across the sand. It was no ordinary meteor. This was something different, something strange. The U.S. government was quick to respond. In a matter of hours, military helicopters were circling the impact zone, and a team of top scientists and officials had arrived. Dr. Emily Hayes, a leading astrobiologist, was one of the first to step out of the black SUV that pulled up to the desert's edge. She had received the call just before midnight, an urgent message from her government contacts. There was something they needed her to see. Emily's heart raced with excitement, mixed with a nervous energy. She had spent her whole life studying alien life, but she never thought she would be standing at the center of a discovery like this. The air smelled faintly of burning metal, and the ground was still warm underfoot. Emily adjusted her glasses, peering at the wreckage in the distance. In the middle of a crater, there was a sleek, metallic craft that looked more like a ship than a fallen star. It was smooth and rounded, unlike any human-made vehicle she had ever seen. Its surface shimmered under the desert moonlight as if it were alive, pulsating with an energy that hummed through the air. "Dr. Hayes, over here," a voice called out. Emily turned to see a young soldier motioning for her to follow. The team had already set up a perimeter around the wreck, securing the area and keeping curious onlookers away. As she approached the ship, she could see the faint outline of something inside, a shape moving ever so slightly. "Are the crew members alive?" Emily asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "We're not sure," the soldier replied. "We've tried getting readings, but it's like nothing we've ever seen before." Emily nodded. Her mind was racing, her scientific training kicking in. She could feel the weight of the moment, the sheer importance of what was unfolding. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. An actual alien vessel, something that would change everything humanity knew about the universe. The door of the ship, or whatever it was, slid open with a low hiss, revealing a strange interior. The walls inside were lined with symbols and patterns that Emily couldn't even begin to understand. The air smelled different, sterile, almost medicinal, with a faint trace of something sweet. As she stepped inside, the others followed, their footsteps echoing in the quiet space. At the center of the ship, laid out on a padded surface, were what appeared to be several figures. They were humanoid but distinctly alien. Their skin glowed faintly, like bioluminescent creatures, and their features were soft, almost ethereal. Their long hair cascaded down their backs, shimmering in shades of silver and gold, and their eyes, when open, were large and almond-shaped, shining with an unnatural brightness. The humans in the room stared in stunned silence. The beings before them looked so peaceful, yet so otherworldly. The Valyrians, as Emily later learned they were called, didn't resemble any alien species Emily had read about in books. They were too beautiful, too graceful, their bodies radiating an aura of power. "Are they alive?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily stepped closer. One of the Valyrians stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. There was a moment of silence as their gazes locked. The alien woman's face was serene, but her eyes were filled with confusion, as though she had just woken up from a long, deep sleep. Slowly, she sat up, her body moving with an elegance that made Emily's breath catch in her throat. The others around her began to stir as well. Emily quickly checked their vitals with the tools she had brought, relieved to find they were all alive, though they seemed weak. As the last of the Valyrians awoke, she lifted her head, looking at the humans around her. The room was thick with tension. Emily could sense something was wrong. These creatures were not just visitors. They were in distress. Their eyes darted around, scanning the humans who had gathered, but it was clear they didn't understand what had happened. They had no idea how they had arrived on Earth or why. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. And then, the woman who had awakened first spoke, her voice like music, soft, melodic, but utterly alien. "Where are we?" she asked. "What is this place?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. The Valyrians had spoken, and with it, they had confirmed something no one had dared to hope for. First contact had been made. The Valyrians remained still, their glowing eyes wide with confusion as they looked around the room. Emily could feel the tension growing. The air between the humans and the aliens was thick with uncertainty. What were these creatures? Where had they come from? And most importantly, why were they here? Emily, ever the scientist, knew she needed to gather as much information as possible. The Valyrians had been unconscious when the team first found them, but now that they were awake, she could start to understand them, or at least try to. She pulled out her tablet, quickly connecting it to the ship's systems. The strange alien technology hummed to life at her touch. Dr. Hayes, one of the soldiers, Private Daniels, whispered, "What's happening?" They look like they could tear us apart if they wanted to." Emily glanced at the Valyrians, who were beginning to stand, their movements fluid and graceful, almost like they were floating rather than walking. They were all tall, with smooth, almost flawless skin that shimmered under the dim lights. Their eyes were large, glimmering with an inner light that seemed to see straight through anyone they looked at. Emily couldn't deny that there was something mesmerizing about them. But there was also something frightening. The Valyrians exuded an energy that felt alien, powerful, otherworldly, yet calm. Despite their beauty and apparent serenity, Emily sensed that they were more dangerous than they seemed. These were not ordinary beings. They were clearly advanced, perhaps beyond anything humans could even imagine. One of the Valyrians, a woman with long silver hair, approached Emily slowly, her eyes locked onto hers. Emily felt a strange pull in her chest, an unexplainable force drawing her toward the alien. It wasn't just physical attraction. It was something deeper, something primal. "Where are we?" The silver-haired woman repeated, her voice soft but insistent. Her accent was strange, her words carrying a musical rhythm that made Emily's heart race. Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You're on Earth. This is our planet." The woman's expression shifted slightly, her brows furrowing as she processed the information. "Earth," she repeated, as if the word itself was foreign to her. "This is not where we intended to be." Emily nodded slowly. "We found your ship. You crashed here." The woman's eyes flickered with something like panic. "Our ship crashed." "No, we must complete our journey." Emily frowned, her curiosity growing. She stepped closer to the Valyrian, her mind racing. "What journey?" she asked carefully. The Valyrian woman hesitated for a moment before answering. "We are the Valyrians. We are a species of harmony, of balance. We travel across the stars to find a place to." She paused, glancing at the others for confirmation. "Mate," another Valyrian, a woman with dark blue hair, said quietly. Her voice had a strange, almost melodic quality to it. She stepped forward, her eyes searching Emily's face. "We must complete our mating season. Without it, we will not survive." Emily's mind spun. Mating season. What did that even mean? And why did it sound so urgent? "Mating season?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The silver-haired woman nodded gravely. "Our species cannot reproduce like other life forms. We have a cycle, a season, that is triggered by the environment we are in. If it is interrupted, if we do not complete the process, we will." She trailed off, her eyes filled with sadness and fear. Emily could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The more the Valyrian spoke, the more questions formed in her mind. It was clear that these beings were not just any visitors from space. They were something different, something rare. And their survival depended on something that no one on Earth could possibly understand. "We need your help," the blue-haired Valyrian continued, her tone desperate. "If we cannot complete the mating season, we will die." The word struck Emily like a blow to the chest. She had spent her entire career studying alien life, and now she found herself in the middle of an interstellar crisis. These creatures, these beings, had no other choice but to rely on her and the humans around her. But what could they do? What was the right thing to do? Emily's mind raced through the possibilities. One of the soldiers, a tall man named Sergeant Thompson, stepped forward. His face was hard, his expression serious. "We can't just let them run wild. They're a threat." "What if they're dangerous?" Emily turned to him sharply. "No, they're not dangerous, at least not on purpose. They're just confused, scared." She glanced back at the Valyrians, who were looking to her with wide, pleading eyes. "They need our help." The air in the room was thick with tension. The soldiers were uneasy, their hands hovering near their weapons. The Valyrians, meanwhile, were calm, but their urgency was undeniable. Emily knew that something bigger was at stake now. This was not just about discovering alien life. This was about saving an entire species, and somehow she had to find a way to help them before it was too late. The tension in the room grew heavier with each passing minute. The Valyrians were no longer just curious visitors from another world. They were desperate beings in need of help. Emily knew that, but the soldiers around her were still uncertain. The air was thick with suspicion. They had no idea what these creatures were capable of, and neither did she. Emily looked at the blue-haired Valyrian who had spoken earlier. Her name, as Emily had learned, was Lyra. Lyra's eyes shone with a strange mixture of fear and urgency. Her silver-haired companion, named Celine, stood beside her, her face pale with distress. They both seemed to be growing weaker by the minute, as if the longer they were on Earth, the more their bodies struggled to adjust to the environment. "We need to complete the mating season," Lyra repeated, her voice shaking. "Without it, we will die. Please, help us." Emily took a deep breath, trying to stay calm despite the pressure. She had to think rationally. The Valyrians were not asking for war. They were not threatening the human race. They simply needed something that, at the moment, seemed impossible for anyone on Earth to understand. One of the soldiers, Sergeant Thompson, took a step forward. "Dr. Hayes, we can't just sit here and do nothing. These creatures could be dangerous. We don't know what they can do." His voice was low but firm. Emily shook her head, holding up a hand to calm him. "They're not dangerous. They're just confused." She turned back to the Valyrians, her mind racing. "What exactly happens during your mating season? Can you explain it to us?" Lyra nodded. "Our species' mating season is triggered by specific environmental conditions. When we find the right atmosphere, the cycle begins. But it can only happen in a particular place. If we do not finish it, our bodies will deteriorate." Slowly, Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The Valyrian survival was tied to something so alien to anything humans knew. But how could she help them complete their mating season? What did they need from Earth to make it happen? Before she could ask, a loud buzzing sound filled the air. One of the scientists, Dr. Fisher, had just connected his laptop to the ship's control panel. "Dr. Hayes," he called urgently. "You need to see this." Emily hurried over to him, her mind still focused on the Valyrians. The laptop screen displayed strange readings, energy signatures, frequencies, and patterns Emily had never seen before. The ship was emitting an unusual signal, a low-frequency pulse that seemed to be vibrating through the ground itself. "This signal," Emily muttered, her brow furrowing. "It's not just energy. It's calling something." "Calling what?" asked Dr. Fisher, confused. Emily's eyes widened as the implications dawned on her. The pulse was a signal, a call. And it wasn't just reaching Earth. It was reaching out to others across the stars. "Their species," Emily whispered. "They're sending a message. It's a call for help, to others of their kind. The room fell silent. The Valyrians, hearing Emily's words, turned to her with wide eyes, understanding what she had just said. Lyra and Selene exchanged a brief look before Lyra spoke again. Our people, they will come. They will hear the call. But if we cannot complete the cycle, they will be too late. Too late? Sergeant Thompson asked, his tone sharp. What do you mean by that? If they come, and you haven't completed this mating process, what happens? Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. We will die. The process is a part of us. If interrupted, we cannot survive. The gravity of the situation hit everyone in the room. The Valyrians were not just stranded on Earth, they were dying, and their entire species might face extinction if the mating cycle wasn't completed. Emily knew that she had to act quickly, but she also knew that the situation was far from simple. As if on cue, another hum echoed through the ship. A new set of readings appeared on Dr. Fisher's laptop. Emily looked at the screen. They're coming, she said, her voice tight with urgency. More Valyrians. They're on their way. The soldiers immediately tensed, their hands inching toward their weapons. How far are they? Thompson asked. They'll be here in a matter of hours, Emily replied, her mind racing. We don't have much time. If the other Valyrians arrive and find out that these ones haven't completed their cycle, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. There was a chance that if the Valyrians' mating season was not completed, Earth could become the battleground for something much larger. Something dangerous. Emily turned back to the Valyrians. We need to find a way to complete the mating season, she said firmly. And we need to do it now. Lyra nodded, but Selene seemed even more anxious now, her eyes darting around the room. We can't stay here. We need to find a place like home. Emily's heart sank. There was no easy solution. The planet was nothing like the Valyrians' world. And the clock was ticking. The situation was spiraling faster than Emily could control. She wasn't just trying to save a species now. She was trying to prevent a crisis that could change everything. The Valyrians' mating season was more than just biology. It was a matter of survival, both for them, and possibly for the human race as well. The clock was ticking. Every minute felt like an hour as Emily stood at the center of a growing crisis. The Valyrians' situation was growing more urgent by the second. More of their kind were on their way, and their arrival only made the stakes higher. Emily had to find a way to help them, before it was too late. The room buzzed with the sound of conversation and whispers, but Emily barely noticed. She was lost in thought, trying to figure out how she could help the Valyrians complete their mating season. Their survival, and the survival of their species, depended on it. But the longer she spent with them, the more questions she had. What exactly did the process involve? What kind of environment did they need? And was there any way humans could possibly understand their needs in time? The soldiers, meanwhile, were getting more nervous. They had been trained to respond to threats, not to protect visitors from another world. Sergeant Thompson paced back and forth, his face tight with worry. We can't just stand around and wait for these other Valyrians to show up, he said, his voice harsh. What if they're dangerous? What if they decide to take control of the situation? Emily turned to face him, her eyes hard. They're not dangerous, she insisted. They're not looking for a fight. They just need our help. If we don't act, they'll die, and their species could disappear. But what do they want us to do? Thompson asked, his voice still filled with doubt. We don't know anything about their biology, their needs. How can we help them complete this mating season? Emily glanced at Lyra and Selene, who were now sitting together, their eyes closed in concentration. The two alien women had not spoken much since Emily's earlier conversation with them, but their expressions showed a deep, silent worry. Their bodies were weak, their energy levels dangerously low. Emily could see that they were struggling to stay awake. We don't know exactly what they need, Emily said quietly, but we have to try. These beings are far more advanced than we are. If they can communicate telepathically, if they can survive the journey across the stars, then maybe they have technology or abilities we don't understand. She turned to Lyra, who opened her eyes slowly at the sound of her name. Lyra, Emily began gently, what can we do to help you? What can we provide? Is there a place on Earth where you can complete this process? Lyra's silver eyes met hers. There was sadness in them, but also something deeper, an unspoken desperation. There is no place like our home, she said softly. But we have found places before, places that have the right energy, the right balance. We need a location where the atmosphere matches the conditions we require. Emily nodded slowly. It made sense. The Valyrians needed more than just a physical place. They needed an environment that could help trigger their mating season. But where would they find such a place on Earth? Emily's mind raced, trying to think of locations with unique atmospheric conditions. Mountains, forests, oceans, anything that could match what the Valyrians were used to. Do you know where these places are? Emily asked, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. Lyra hesitated for a moment, looking at the other Valyrians. They all seemed to share an unspoken bond, their eyes meeting in quiet communication. Finally, Lyra spoke. We will guide you, but you must be quick. The other Valyrians are coming, and they will not understand why we have not completed the cycle. Emily felt a wave of unease. She couldn't imagine how the arriving Valyrians would react to this situation. Would they see the humans as allies, or would they consider them enemies who were preventing the cycle from completing? We'll help, Emily said firmly, but we need to know exactly what you require. We can't afford to make any mistakes. Lyra nodded, then slowly rose to her feet. She walked over to the console in the ship and began pressing buttons. The ship hummed softly, and soon a holographic map appeared in the air. The map showed several locations around the world, each marked with glowing dots. These are places we found before, Lyra explained. They have the right energy, but we cannot go to all of them. We must choose quickly. Emily studied the map carefully. Each of the locations was remote, far from cities or human settlements. Some were located in the deep forests, others in high mountain ranges. But one place caught her eye. A remote area in the Pacific Ocean, an uncharted island that seemed to have an unusual energy signature. This one, Emily said, pointing to the map. The island. It's isolated, and there's no human activity nearby. It could be our best option. Lyra looked at the island for a long moment, then nodded. That is where we need to go. Emily quickly turned to the soldiers. Prepare for immediate transport. We have no time to waste. Within minutes, a small team of soldiers, along with Emily and a few of the scientists, were ready to depart. The ship's engines roared to life as they set off toward the uncharted island, the sound of the Valyrians' urgent voices echoing in Emily's ears. As they flew toward the island, Emily couldn't help but wonder what would happen once they arrived. Would the Valyrians be able to complete their mating season? And more importantly, would they be able to survive long enough for the rest of their kind to arrive? The journey to the island was tense. The ship cut through the sky, and Emily could see the vast blue ocean below, stretching endlessly. The soldiers sat in silence, their faces tight with anxiety. They had been trained for combat, for security. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this. A species from another planet, their very survival tied to completing a mysterious mating cycle. None of it made sense. Emily sat with Lyra and Celine, who were sitting quietly in the back of the ship, looking exhausted but still alert. Their bodies seemed frail, as though the longer they went without completing the mating season, the more their energy drained away. Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. If they didn't find the right place in time, it could be the end for the Valyrians. We're almost there, Dr. Fisher said, breaking the silence. The island is just ahead. Emily leaned forward in her seat, staring out the window. The island was small, covered in dense jungle, surrounded by sharp cliffs that dropped into the ocean below. It was remote, perfect for what the Valyrians needed. But as the ship drew closer, Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. They had no way of knowing if the island would truly have the right conditions. They could be rushing toward failure, and the thought made her heart race. "Do you think this will work?" Sergeant Thompson asked, his voice filled with doubt. "I don't know," Emily admitted, "but it's our only option." As they approached the island, the ship's instruments started beeping, picking up unusual readings. The closer they got, the more intense the signals became, like some kind of strange energy coming from deep within the island itself. "Something's not right," Dr. Fisher muttered, glancing at his screen. "These readings, they're unlike anything I've seen." The ship's alarm suddenly blared, and the pilots scrambled to maintain control. "We've lost power," one of them shouted. The ship lurched and tilted, and for a brief moment, Emily thought they were going to crash into the ocean. But then the ship steadied, and the alarm stopped. The instruments seemed to reset themselves, and the ship's lights flickered back on. They had landed, roughly, but safely, on the island's beach. Emily let out a breath of relief, but didn't feel safe. Something was off about this place. The air felt thick, like it was alive, pulsing with energy. She glanced at Lyra and Celine. The two Valyrians seemed to be reacting to the atmosphere, their eyes wide as they took in the surroundings. "It's different," Lyra whispered. Her voice trembled, as though she felt the same uneasy tension in the air. "It's strong, but not like what we're used to. We can't waste time." Emily quickly motioned for the soldiers to gather their equipment and begin setting up. They needed to make this place as comfortable as possible for the Valyrians, but there was no time to waste. The other Valyrians could arrive at any moment, and Emily had no idea how they would react to the news that their species was struggling to survive. The group made their way deeper into the jungle. The dense trees above provided little sunlight, and the air was humid, thick with the smell of earth and salt water. Strange sounds echoed around them, unfamiliar creatures calling out from the distance. "We should move faster," Sergeant Thompson urged. "We don't know what else could be here." As they walked, Emily kept an eye on the Valyrians. Lyra and Celine moved carefully, their steps slow but deliberate. They were clearly weakened, but they still maintained an air of grace and dignity. Emily couldn't help but admire their strength. They were in a desperate situation, yet they moved like they still held on to some hope. Eventually, they'd reached the center of the island, a large clearing surrounded by tall, strange trees with leaves that glowed faintly in the dim light. At the center of the clearing was a pool of water, its surface shimmering with a soft, iridescent light. The air here felt different, calmer, almost soothing. Emily felt it too, the strange pull of energy. "This is it," Lyra said softly, stepping forward. "This place, it's strong. This will work." The Valyrians knelt beside the pool, their eyes closed as they began to focus. Emily and the soldiers watched in silence, unsure of what to do next. Lyra and Celine started to glow faintly, their bodies seemed to pulse with energy as they reached out toward the water. Emily had no idea what was happening, but she could feel the tension in the air, the growing power as the Valyrians connected to the strange forces of the island. Suddenly, there was a low rumble, like thunder in the distance. The trees around them seemed to tremble, and the pool of water began to swirl. Emily's heart raced. This was happening. But what did it mean? What would it lead to? As the rumble grew louder, the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift. Emily barely had time to react before the sky above them darkened. Clouds swirling like a storm was forming overhead. "Stay close," Sergeant Thompson ordered, but his voice sounded distant, drowned out by the roar of the storm. Then, in the blink of an eye, a new presence appeared. Out of the swirling clouds, a ship descended, its design unlike anything Emily had seen before. It was the size of a small city, dark and sleek, with glowing blue lights tracing its edges. "They're here," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and fear. The storm continued to rage as the ship touched down, and Emily realized that the fate of the Valyrians, and possibly Earth itself, was about to change forever. The storm in the sky intensified. The wind howled, whipping through the trees, as the massive ship descended. Its engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground beneath Emily and the others. The soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, their eyes darting nervously toward the strange, dark craft that had appeared from nowhere. Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. This was it. The other Valyrians had arrived. But what would they want? Would they see the humans as allies, or as obstacles to their survival? The Valyrians, Lyra and Selene, remained kneeling by the glowing pool of water, their bodies flickering with faint, shimmering light. They seemed unaware of the growing storm around them, as though they were completely absorbed in their connection to the island's strange energy. But Emily could see the tension in their faces, the silent fear in their eyes. The arrival of the other Valyrians could be both a blessing and a curse. The ship's massive doors opened with a hiss, and a group of tall, imposing figures stepped out. Their skin was a deep shade of violet, their eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. They were the same species as Lyra and Selene, but they looked different, stronger, more powerful, with an air of authority that immediately commanded attention. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the power radiating from these beings, and the soldiers around her tensed, clearly on edge. This was no ordinary group of visitors. These were the leaders of the Valyrians, and they were not here to make friends. One of the figures, a tall male with silver hair, stepped forward. His voice was deep, commanding, and he spoke directly to Lyra and Selene in their alien language. Emily couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. There was anger in it, frustration, and something else, something cold and calculating. Lyra's head snapped up at the sound of his voice. Her body trembled slightly as she met his gaze, but there was no mistaking the fierce determination in her eyes. "We have tried," she said in a quiet but firm voice, "but the cycle has not been completed. The atmosphere here is not like our home." The tall male's expression darkened. He spoke again, this time more sharply, his words cutting through the air like a blade. Emily didn't need to understand the language to know that he was not happy. Whatever had brought the Valyrians to Earth, whatever mission they had, was failing, and these leaders were holding Lyra and Selene accountable. One of the soldiers, unable to contain his nervous energy, stepped forward and spoke in English. "What do you want from us? What do you need?" The Valyrians looked at him, and for a moment there was silence. Then the tall male spoke again, his voice softer but no less intense. "Your species has interfered with the cycle. We cannot complete it without the correct conditions. You have taken us too far from our own kind." Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We didn't know. We're trying to help. The island, this place, has the right energy. It's the closest thing to what you need. Please, give it time." The Valyrians seemed to consider her words for a moment. The tall male exchanged a glance with the others, and then slowly he nodded. "You may be right, but we need more. We need to connect to our home, our people. Without that, we will die." Emily's heart sank. She knew what that meant. They didn't just need Earth's atmosphere. They needed something deeper, something that only their own kind could provide. The soldiers remained on edge, weapons still drawn, eyes trained on the new arrivals. They didn't know if they could trust these beings, especially now that they were demanding more than just their cooperation. But Emily had no choice. She couldn't let the Valyrians die. She couldn't let a potential threat to humanity grow stronger by being ignored. "There has to be something we can do," Emily said, her voice filled with urgency. "You're saying that your people can help, but how? How can we contact them?" The tall male turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "We can send a signal, a call to our people, but it is complicated. The signal is not designed to reach your kind." Emily frowned. She had no idea what kind of technology they were talking about, But she could see the desperation in the Valyrians' eyes. They weren't lying. They were truly fighting for their survival. "What can we do to help?" she asked again, this time with more conviction. The tall male hesitated, and then his eyes narrowed. "We need your technology, your communication systems, your best satellite. If we can link our signal to it, we can send the message to our home." Emily glanced at Dr. Fisher and the other scientists. This was their area of expertise. They could make it happen if they had the right equipment and the time. But there was one big problem. What if the Valyrians were asking for more than they were letting on? "We'll do it," Emily said, turning back to the tall Valyrian. "But we'll need your cooperation. Full transparency. We can't risk any surprises." The Valyrian leader nodded, though there was still suspicion in his eyes. "Agreed. But know this, if you fail to help us, you will have made an enemy of our kind, and we will not forget." Emily felt the weight of his words. The fate of the Valyrians was now in their hands, and with the threat of an unknown alien power lurking in the distance, she had no idea what was coming next. The storm above them raged, but Emily knew one thing for certain. The real battle was only just beginning. The storm above the island was like a living thing, swirling with violent energy, as if the atmosphere itself was reacting to the arrival of the other Valyrians. The air felt thick, charged with an electric tension. Emily stood in the clearing, surrounded by the towering figures of the Valyrians. They were waiting, watching, and time was running out. "We don't have much longer," Dr. Fisher whispered, adjusting his equipment. "We need to get the signal out, and we need it fast." Emily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the moment. If they failed to help the Valyrians now, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for them, but for the entire planet. The Valyrians had made it clear they would not forgive failure. "Can you make contact with their people?" Emily asked the Valyrian leader, his name still unknown. His glowing eyes narrowed as he regarded her, his tall form looming over them. "Yes," the leader replied, his voice cold but determined. "But only with your help. Your technology is limited. We need more than what you can offer." Emily glanced at Dr. Fisher, who was already working with the team of scientists to prepare the satellite equipment. They had brought everything they could to the island. But even with the best of Earth's technology, the Valyrians were asking for more. A perfect alignment of their signal with Earth's communication system. The window for success was rapidly closing. "We'll do what we can," Emily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But we need your full cooperation. Every piece of your technology, every detail." The Valyrian leader regarded her for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "You have our word. But remember, failure is not an option." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The weight of those words hung in the air. She couldn't afford to fail. Not now. Not when so many lives were at stake. The soldiers, their faces grim, spread out around the clearing, keeping watch as the scientists worked furiously to set up the equipment. The Valyrians, though weakened, were watching over the pool of shimmering water, their bodies glowing brighter by the minute. Lyra and Celine were both kneeling beside the pool, their expressions serene but pained, as though they were tapping into some deeper power. It was clear that the mating cycle was in progress, but the connection they needed was still missing. "Is everything ready?" Emily asked, turning to Dr. Fisher. "Almost," he replied, his brow furrowed with concentration. "We need to synchronize the signal with their energy. But it's tricky. The Valyrians' technology isn't like anything we've encountered. It's more advanced." Emily's mind raced. What if they couldn't make it work? What if the Valyrians' technology was beyond their ability to understand? Would the alien leaders become enemies? Would the Valyrians perish right here on Earth? But before she could voice any of these concerns, the air around them seemed to shift. The sky above darkened even further, and the wind picked up with an eerie howl. The Valyrians stood up, their glowing forms pulsing as they raised their hands toward the heavens. It was as if they were drawing power from the storm itself. "There is no time left," the leader said suddenly, his voice filled with urgency. "The signal must be sent now." Without waiting for further instructions, the Valyrians began to speak in their alien language, their words flowing like an ancient chant. Emily felt a shiver run through her. The energy in the air was growing stronger, almost overwhelming. She could see the shimmering pool of water starting to ripple violently, as though it were alive, responding to their call. "Now," the Valyrian leader shouted. Dr. Fisher and his team hit a series of buttons on the control panel. The equipment hummed to life, the satellite array spinning into position. The signal began to pulse, first faintly, then stronger. The connection to the Valyrians' home planet was forming, but it was unstable. Emily could see it. The signal was wavering, flickering in and out, like a fragile thread trying to connect two distant worlds. Come on," she muttered under her breath, her eyes glued to the monitors. "Don't fail now." The storm raged above them, the wind howling like a beast ready to tear through everything in its path. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the Valyrians continued their chant. Emily could feel the tension in the air, the world holding its breath. The connection had to be made. It was their last chance. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, a sharp electric sound, and the entire clearing was bathed in bright, blinding light. Emily squinted, shielding her eyes as the energy surged through the air like a shockwave. The satellite systems beeped furiously, and the signal locked into place. "It's working," Dr. Fisher shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. "The connection is stable." The Valyrians stopped chanting, their bodies glowing brightly as the energy they had summoned began to settle. They stood in silence, their eyes closed, as though they were listening for something far away. The storm above them began to calm, the winds dying down, and the sky lightened as if the earth itself had exhaled in relief. For a long moment, no one spoke. The group watched in awe as the Valyrians completed their mating cycle, their energy levels rising and stabilizing. The connection to their home was secure, and Emily knew it was only a matter of time before help arrived. The Valyrian leader finally opened his eyes, turning toward Emily. "You have done it," he said, his voice soft, but full of gratitude. "You have saved us, and in doing so, you have earned our trust." Emily exhaled deeply, a sense of relief washing over her, but she knew this wasn't over. The Valyrians had survived, but their future, Earth's future, was still uncertain. The other Valyrians might return, and the consequences of that remained unknown. "Thank you," Emily said simply, but she knew there was more to come. They had only just begun to understand the vastness of what they had encountered. The skies had cleared, the storm had passed, but the future was still waiting, uncertain and full of questions.